amante poi che piace amore, potendo quel cacciolo mi fa plorare. Piangete amante poi che piace amore,
You can get to the Louvre by metro, Louvre Rivoli Station or Palais Royal Musée du Louvre on the Neuilly-Vincennes line. The Sacré-Cœur, Montmartre. The Grand Palais, Pont Alexandre III, Place de la Concorde, Rue de Rivoli, and the Tuileries Gardens. You can get to the Louvre from the Eiffel Tower over the Parisian rooftops, but only by eye and with the help of the telescope. You can get to the Louvre by reading a notebook, forgotten by some philosopher-poet at the foot of a work of art, or somewhere high up. You can get to the Louvre through the sky if you're a falcon, like those trained in the courtyard of the chateau in days gone by. Behind the bird, the camera glides towards the pyramid the poet has quietly overturned.
This is not a pyramid. It's an hourglass that we're about to turn over so that the time of this visit can begin and already slid by, then soon run out.
This is not a pyramid. It's an hourglass that we're about to turn over so that the time of this visit can begin and already slid by, then soon run out.
Here, the foundations of what was once a chateau that stood in the center of its country, the first France. The oriflamme streamed on its towers at the time. Now we have to walk down gloomy corridors before coming, surprised, to the edge of the moats. But what silence, and how lovely these stones are. The castle of ambitions, arrogance, violence, and dreams has become this beauty that evokes a release from the pipe dreams of time and space. But there's more. Next to the architect of wars was the one who shaped the proportions of these walls, who chose this curve in the towers. And it is to this head of operations, and to his thinking that we can now pay homage for a lucky turn of events, has placed the largest museum over the oldest ramparts.
The Maximilian tapestries, hunting scenes in Flanders. One for every month of the year. Images woven patiently for months and years on end. All these different colored threads to find the thread of a story. Man needs all this work to constitute his memory, while the animal carries the whole of its memory within, instinct. In this way, face to face or back to back, the museum with images of a man-hunter who outside these images is no more than the animal who carries within itself all images of all hunts. Another thread of another account.
Having passed the chateau, let's go to where our impression of reality does not, for that matter, cease. These tapestries, for example, isn't this an undergrowth through which we are winding our way for a moment? Around us the worn-out colors of earth beneath the trees. Moss, mushrooms, lichen, herbs, where we thought we had glimpsed horses, peasants, hunters, and God knows what else. Perhaps a museum is to emerge and end up on a sweeping expanse of meadows and hills, with rivers gleaming in the distance, and our sun again, even if here it is dimmed by a haze of images.
The museum shows and designates works of art, but artworks rarely show the museum. They tend rather to obliterate it, to extend their space, their imaginary territory, way beyond the frames and the walls that contain them. The museum will sometimes be obliterated by a forest, if it is from a forest that the images come.
I would have liked to enter a place like this as a child, to go up this long stairway as if I were climbing against the headwind of the shadows coming down the steps.
In museums all over the world, there are stairs. They vary in height and number, but it's always an ordeal to climb them against the tide of those who have already seen and who flow back, as if in backward motion, so as not to shake off the images, so as not to turn their backs on the museum.
As if I were climbing against the headwind of the shadows coming down the steps.
And what a fantastic stroke of intuition it was at the Louvre, to put at the summit of these steps leading to the painting collection, the Victory of Samothrace, its wings spread out over the world.
The painter transported in the museum. Painting in the museum and painting the museum. Hubert Robert painted the museum as the Impressionists later painted railway stations. The museum is a railway station. It transports us, carries us across time. Here, the Grand Gallery is like a railway cutting through the landscape of Italian painting. The Cimabue Caravaggio line stops at Giotto, Uccello, Mantegna, Botticelli, Da Vinci, Raphael, Titian. Change at Tintoretto for Veronese. The line continues to Carracci, Caravaggio and Rosa. You can get off at any of these stops and spend some time. The museum will let you off at a work that beckoned you and which you might not have planned to visit. A two-way flow of paintings by period and visitors by generation, each watching the other pass by. Two centuries of museum history facing 40 centuries of art history. At the other end, the journey is brought to a close by a tracking shot in the museum. Filming a museum as you'd film a city, a landscape, or a visit to the zoo. Nowadays, everyone films the museum. Each visitor is a man with a camera. The museum is also a Tower of Babel, a museum of speeches on art, guided tours in all languages, including silent ones. The Marriage at Cana by Veronese. Illusion of an intimacy between images, between painting and cinema. Filming paintings is seeking, whatever the cost, the visible movement on the surface, when in fact the image is nothing but a vibration in its thickness. Two ways of examining the sky, two attempts to grasp it. The last train has arrived. The station is empty. It's closing time. Silence has returned. The museum can dream of being itself in its own images, of being seen at long last for itself, being the goal of the visit, the sanctuary, the site. But for this purpose, must it really go to the point of becoming a ruin with a caved-in roof, open to the sight of the sky?
All of this, the library, where what we know about the works in the nearby museum and what we thought we knew is accumulated.
Just like the room on the ship's bow, where maps of the shoals, the currents, and the stars are spread out so as to steer through the narrow straits. To be at the Louvre and to know that there are all these rooms that we'll never ever visit, and even farther, along the hidden passageways, the reserved collections, the offices of curators or photographers, the cement stairways with pipes leading to ancient rooms, the closets for brooms or bags of plaster, the cellars and the crypts, this time in contact with the unshaped ground, unaware of itself, blind to our plans and to our dreams. Is it not this moment of lucidity that is a true reason for being of a great museum?
At times, the texts in the notebook are drawn up and laid down like images, written images covering absent images, since the poet not only writes with words, he also sketches. This is why the poet is able to zero in on the images of painting better than anyone else.
La Gioconda, the Mona Lisa, the most well-known of all paintings, but also the greatest enigma. He was an artist who dreamed that through his renewal of scientific technique, he could achieve a perfect rendering with nothing to disturb the illusion of the young woman who agreed to sit for him as long as he needed, her hands idle, her gaze attentive to his every move, aware only of the silent intensity of his strange undertaking. Leonardo da Vinci wanted to release nature from all the prejudices and from all the myths that had veiled its countenance. But what do we see in these slightly cracked colors? Nothing but a gaze, telling us that the face on which it appears is itself but a veil, and making us realize that these eyes, this mouth, these two crossed hands, and these mountains in the distance, and the sky are all painted over the night of a smile from somewhere else, like some proof of another world. This indeed is painting. The farther the illusion is taken, the more the pretense speaks of absence, the more precise the appearance, the more deeply and infinitely it proves to be the veil.
The Venus of Milo is an astral body, no longer a woman, but rather a form radiating in the center of its galaxy. Around it, a whole world abides by its law. All that approaches it becomes its satellite and begins to gravitate around it. Fragments of matter separated from larger entities. Meteors, faces, planets on which sometimes life appears. Sometimes the low point of an orbit pulls a profile back, one that was belatedly detached from its surface and whose scorched outline is eclipsed in passing. The light emitted by the Venus of Milo is so white that it seems quite close. You could practically touch it.
She was identified without shock as being Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of beauty. This is one of our most names.
At times, the museum is a carousel, a theatre with a revolving stage, a ghost train for a circular, cyclical show. Here, Poussin's Four Seasons.
These trees in spring, they are the most beautiful in the history of painting.
As for me, I've been going on like this for a long time, looking for the missing piece of the puzzle.
And now, it seems to me as if this octagonal room, where four paintings mirror each other ad infinitum, is the outlet of a long subterranean corridor that I'd been following for years, almost since my birth.
Sometimes the corridor became wider, in spots where lights were shining, and I could make out vague outlines on the walls. But never as yet, not even through the rifts in the vault, had the light of the beginning reappeared.
Winter comes. The carousel ride is ending. The images are breaking loose, receding, disappearing into the night.
And now for a few of these encounters with someone deep within, that since the moment of discovery we wish would never end, with the Pietà of Avignon to begin with, this force of nobility and compassion that might just suffice to balance out all the mistakes, horrors, and lost opportunities of human history. Or in front of Georges de la Tour's Saint Sebastian tended by Saint Irenaeus. It's the dead of the night. There is a single flame left burning in the world. But since it is the flame of genuine compassion, it suffices to light and to heal. It can even reinvent a bit of color. This blue cowl, and beneath it, the watchful eye of hope, his hands restless with fear.
To get to the place of pilgrimage, a couple splitting itself in two several times, occupying an as yet absent setting until it appears. But the scenario is reversible.
One might suppose, in front of the embarkation for Citera, that art's function is to make the world disappear, beckoning men and women and trees and light to an island over yonder that is but an illusion. Which explains the ferryman, the same one who at nightfall ferries the dead to the other shore. Much more real than this Claude Lorrain, since this time it's as if the sun had come down to earth, yonder again, beneath the horizon, but also already in the boat that is about to enter the harbor.
In the City of Light, the sun is no longer king. Indifferent to the majestic sunset, the seething hive of activity impatiently surrounds the Louvre. Apollo's gallery, a treasure room, a setting for an adventure story or a site of pure speculation. Gold, silver, diamonds, gems, crowns, necklaces, swords, crystals. Trade value, symbolic value, the relativity of values. Here the object of art is the object per se. The regent, one of the world's most beautiful diamonds, or simply the lens of a magic lantern. A stone, so to speak. Fake light in a fake night. Pipe dreams, illusions. Inert paintings turned into sparkling motion pictures. The electrician unplugs the shining beam. Showtime is over. It's time to go back to class.
French painting. The kind that school children in France know only through their history textbooks, drenched in the madness of tyrants and splattered with the blood of battles. These books that put us to sleep, which is ultimately the best way of reaching, by way of dreams, the truth glimpsed by painters, of reaching by way of night, day or light.
A pupil pretends that his desk is a movable watchtower, looking out over the landscape of all the subjects taught. To begin with, the museum is in books, and the museum is a book. But you need to find the right lighting and the right height for leafing through the pictures here. In the rooms of 19th century French painting, large size paintings hung high, feature pictures on big screens. You have to pull yourself up to a ringside seat, or as in the old types of cinema, to the dress circle. The history book becomes a mere program that you consult to check the order of the acts, or for a summary of the action. We compare the illustrations in the book, pictures of pictures, to the scenes visible at the museum, which become the real event, the live performance, the indisputable reference. The school desk can then turn into an umpire seat, the ideal standpoint to decide between the beautiful and the ugly. Algerian women in their apartments. The raft of the Medusa. Coronation of Napoleon I at Notre Dame. Napoleon on the battlefield at Eylau. The intervention of the Sabine women. Liberty leading the people. Death of Sardanapalus. Bonaparte visiting the plague-stricken at Jaffa. The museum room is a classroom dream blown up. There are scenes in the museum that can only be shot on the spur of the moment, false location shots, since the museum hurriedly conceals the places where it has nothing to show. An empty room and frame, though, are what is needed for the museum to direct the eye. These abstract images, left behind by other images, are entitled The Queen's Reconciliation with Her Son. The museum takes a character out of the spotlight and places it behind the scenes, cast into the shadows, the dungeon, purgatory, returning among ghosts. Will it ever come back to the light of the rooms? There is a whole counter-museum here that doesn't know why it's fallen into disgrace. And one can hear the relentless murmurings of claims and hopes for the next rotation of roles. There's a lot of talk of new space where everyone will have his place in the sun.
Must we really go down to the reserve collections? Perhaps just for a moment, just to take stock of the danger. In the chaos of the sculpture stocks, as in the chaotic reasoning of the unconscious, it is the unexpected that prevails and deludes us. Whereas elsewhere in life, we are led by the great artworks to the meaning of what is, and beyond, to the mystery.
This resembles not so much a museum of natural history as a museum of supernatural history. These effigies of animals are gods, the ancestors of our own. All you need is to be fond of animals.
Why do we love Egypt so? The massiveness, the solemnity, the grand hieratic gestures, the stones piled up ad infinitum over the dead. Why is it that all this stiffness, which seemingly conjures up nothing other than nothingness, than the dark regions, turns ever so graceful and tender before us, a maiden leading us down a narrow grass path toward the murmuring of a shore? Why?
Because here for the first time sculptors dared to recognize on the faces carved in the stone something that had been attempted only fleetingly and timidly until then, the smile. Let's stop before the statue of an official moving forward with his wife in death. Nothing remains of the smile in them, save, and that is its essence, this staunch, ever so serene determination. Ever since Egypt, the greatest art has lived on the meditation of the smile alone.
If the whole of the great Egyptian civilization can be contemplated from the Nile, all you need is to go down the Seine to see all of the Louvre unfurling before you. By the way it surrenders itself to the eye, sculpture is capable of playing out the scenario of a coup de théâtre. Here the plot is played by a single character, at least in terms of casting. What makes this lovely sleeper so disarming? Is it that the play has two scenes, one on each side? These Japanese tourists, spontaneously circling around it, haven't missed the point. Act 1. A woman is sleeping in a position that reveals a voluptuous slumber, obviously dreaming of a man. Act 2. Without leaving the dream, and probably by the very strength of it, the young woman has become the man she was dreaming of, but who has slipped away from her because he too is dreaming that he's a woman. The delighted public fully appreciates the salient aspects of the sculpted text. Epilogue. Apparently, if you turn very quickly round the plot, you can get a glimpse of the happy ending. It's one hell of an acrobatic feat. High-spirited as the horses of Mali might be, they've moved across the centuries at a slow pace. Here they've probably reached the end of the race. And the fact that these 30 tons of marble once floated in the sky at the start of the Champs-Élysées will one day be forgotten. Here they almost look like circus parade horses, under the loveliest tent in the world. Apparently the Grand Louvre is not too grand for them. Beneath this other glass tent, the Louvre is preparing one of its spectacular productions with the entire company of French sculptors. For the moment, the performance is being rehearsed behind the scenes with all the star players. During final adjustments to the lighting, their stand-ins are sent on stage. Cinema can cheat by getting them to play their parts. The stage directions are simple. The challenge of sculpture is to make us forget the weight of matter. Sometimes, mademoiselle, the stand-in gets so carried away that it's hard to bring her back down to earth. Back to earth at the foot of the bulls of Khorsabad. Here, on the contrary, the beauty is in the weight and the age-old immobility. Along with the transport of the stone monuments, the museum brought back the density of the air. And to rescue the characters, cinema reanimates them image by image right up to the exit. Napoleon III's apartments. Here the Louvre is no longer totally a museum. This is a palace where many highly serious gentlemen once decided the fate of the world with a lofty eye. Yet everywhere, throughout the decor, there are angels. Pure theatre.
Il aperçoit le panache que j'ai là-haut, le panache que j'ai là-haut, oui. Et vif partout, et tarapapapou, je suis moi le général Bob. Et vif partout, et tarapapapou, je suis moi le général Bob. Et vif partout, et tarapapapou, j'aime bien le général Bob. Et vif partout, et tarapapapou, j'aime bien le général Bob. Dans le salon après la guerre, je me parlais, il a une belle pour me plaire, se met pas doucement, vos souriants, passez-moi pour la panache, et fort gênant, mon panache, et fort gênant, et bip, et tabarabou, je suis moi le général Bob, et bip, et tabarabou, je suis moi le général Bob, et bip, et tabarabou, je suis moi le général Bob, et bip, et tabarabou, il est le général Bob.
At night, the noisiest dreams become silent again. The Cour Carré under the moon is no longer in any known place on earth. When close by, in the Salle de Caryatide, the music of one last party begins.
Is this a place for a musician? Must there be a musician on these stretches of beach where boats have been washed up, covered with seaweed, among boulders glistening with patches of foam? There seems to be a violinist hiding behind this boulder, or another, or behind one of the boats. Again and again, we think we've spotted him, but he's not there, and we hear only his hushed laughter getting ever more remote, and in his wake we go too far away. We lose our way, and the world ceases. The artworks in museums are abandoned boats. At night the wind blows through the rooms, the sea howls, and how dangerous is the musician who draws us in. It is the imaginary. It is death.
What did I see at the Louvre? I don't know anymore. I followed the flight of a falcon, a child, a notebook. When will I ever see the Louvre again as at first sight?